Hey everyone, Kenny here from the OK&Y podcast. We're doing something a little different today. We're looking at Star Wars Unlimited's second set. I've been playing much more Star Wars Unlimited than I have Flesh and Blood recently, so Oliver and Yichin are my willing hostages today to talk about the set. How you doing, Yichin?
I'm doing pretty good. I have played a little bit of Star Wars Unlimited. I did a couple of drafts and played a couple of demo decks. I thought the gameplay was okay for the most part, not something I would be super invested in. But obviously, I'm pretty interested to see how the gameplay develops and evolves over the next few sets. So I am totally fine casting a judgmental eye on it, knowing nothing about the set and nothing about the competitive scene.
Yeah, that you're basically me from the Flesh and Blood videos.
Yeah. So I'll be judging this harshly and saying things are just interesting rather than praising them.
You could complain about talents somehow.
Yeah. Like light and dark are just basically just talents, right? So
They are, but you know what? They were talents from set one, so it's okay. It's all good. And how you doing, Oliver?
Hello. My experience is I played a couple of starter deck games with Kenny. And then he gave me some constructed decks. And I like Palpatine. That's about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he's the lore
Oliver's,
expert.
I am not
that's
a
right.
lore
Oliver is
expert.
lore expert. I'm
Nope.
also like semi-lore expert, but I feel like Oliver's probably a bit more up to date with stuff than me. I
We'll
only
see
know
about
the
that.
out-of-date canon.
Yeah, I don't remember things on the fly. I always had to look it up. So
Yeah, well, there's a lot of I feel like there's a lot of characters in the set where I'm just like, who? Over and over again.
Mhm.
Which really shows how much I know about the more modern stuff. But there are quite a few obscure characters. I don't think I've included too many of them in the slides today. Oh, that's another new thing we're trying. Slideshow. Because I put something together to try and give some kind of thematic cohesion to what we're talking about.
Mhm.
yeah, Kenny's just more
Yeah.
organized than us.
Say again, sorry, Oliver.
You're just more organized than us.
Oh, I don't know if I
Meanwhile,
was
we
more
just
organized. You waited for 40 minutes while I put it together when we were all ready to record.
it's fine.
But yeah, anyway, so I guess the key thing is it's not a full set review. I didn't have enough time to put a whole PowerPoint together for the entire set. I'm sure at some point I'll probably talk about that from a more competitive standpoint. Instead, I'm kind of just going over the major themes of the stuff today and talking about how I feel about it and showcasing a few cards I think are interesting from those, as well as at the end a few cards that are just interesting in general from the set. I'm not saying that all the cards here are like the most powerful cards from the set, not at all. It's just things that I think are interesting. I may also mention a few cards that may not be showcased, and I don't know, maybe we'll edit them in or something. I don't know. Oliver said minimal editing, so probably not, but you'll just hear us talk about them.
That's good. My first question, actually, looking at this splash art, Oliver, why does Darth Maul only have a one-sided lightsaber? Doesn't he have a two-sided lightsaber? Wasn't that his whole
Uh
gimmick?
no, when he gets cut in half, he only has a single bladed lightsaber. He comes back in Clone Wars,
Oh,
or not Clone Wars,
he's
but
not cut in half here.
what's up?
He's not cut in half here.
Well, he has metal legs now.
Yeah, he
Okay.
got better.
Yeah, he got
Yeah.
better. That's it.
But yeah, he does still use double bladed a couple times afterwards. Like
Yeah,
he uses it in his final fight against Kenobi
and
Mm.
Ahsoka.
when he gets immediately shreked.
Yep.
But yeah.
Yeah. That's
All
pretty
right.
much.
Well, anyway, let's get into it. So one of the major themes in the set is Mandalorians and kind of upgrade matters. So
Mhm.
there's three different leaders. I'm going to interchangeably call them leaders or heroes. I tend to call them heroes even when they're villains, but you get my point. There's three different leaders in the set that all Mandalorians, and they all care in some way about the major theme of them. So we've got Gar Saxon for villainy, and then the Mandalorian himself, and Bo-Katan for heroic. As I said, most of the cards in the set that are Mandalorian focused tend to care in some way about upgrades. So you can see Clan Challenges gains Overwhelm when he's got upgraded. When he's got upgrades, the Armorer hands out shield tokens to Mandalorian units, and shield tokens and experience tokens do count as upgrades. So all of the
Oh.
upgrades matter stuff works with them.
Mhm.
Razor Crest brings back an upgrade, which works well with the Mandalorian himself, who exhausts stuff when you play upgrades. Gar Saxon gives units who are upgraded +1 attack. So there's lots of upgrade matters. And you can see again in Super Commando Squad and in Fen Rao too. Fen Rao really likes upgrades, and the more you play on them, the more -2/-2s you can hand out.
Gotcha. So in the Mandalorian's case, his leader ability, would that trigger off of shield counters and experience counters too, or is that just when you play it from hand?
Yeah, so it doesn't work off shield counters or experience counters because you don't play those. So he doesn't trigger as well with those, but he does trigger well with some other upgrades in the set, which I'm going to talk about. The Mandalorian himself is interesting in that he is kind of Mandalorian focused, but he's also bounty hunting focused, which makes total sense for his character. And so in this set, which we'll touch on a bit later, there are a few different upgrades that you will play not on your own characters, but he works well with them, as well as working well with the Mandalorian matters stuff, which I think is pretty neat. By the way, I've only shown the kind of hero sides of all of the Mandalorians here. So all of them are 4/7. They all come out on 6. The only thing you really need to know, so Gar Saxon on his leader side doesn't have the when defeated additional clause. The Mandalorian only exhausts things that have 4 or less health and only once per turn. And Bo-Katan can only deal 1 damage, basically, by exhausting if you've attacked with a Mandalorian unit.
Okay.
The other thing as well is, so you kind of have this breakup of Mandalorian units across colors. So there's Mandalorians in blue, which they certainly tend to be a bit more, I guess, upgrade heavy or more shield heavy. Whereas the ones in red tend to be more raid and attack heavy, which you see a lot more.
I see. Yeah, it seems like a pretty reasonable thing to include in set 2. It's the classic, make your normally bad cards a better, just overall better.
Mhm.
Like I noticed in the first set, most of your leaders slash heroes, their abilities were basically just like either do thing, get value that you're normally gonna do, or like just like by itself get some sort of value.
Yeah.
And this feels like definitely a second set thing where it's like, oh, these upgrade cards that are normally not super great unless you're like inherently not super great,
Mhm.
make them a worthwhile thing to build around.
Yeah, I agree that generally speaking, upgrades are just asking for trouble, right? There's very few in set 1 that are playable, and most of them are playable because of Chirrut. Chirrut's a leader who basically can't be removed from the board.
Mhm.
He can't be removed from the board via damage, so you can kind of spot removal him, which is still pretty hard anyway. There's not a lot of spot removal that kills leaders, although there is a little bit more now in the new set. So
Mhm.
he was great with upgrades because he couldn't be bounced, etc. But other than that, you are often just asking for trouble.
Mhm.
Any thoughts
How's it-
on the theme, Oliver?
Do they actually have a dark saber as a as a
They do.
oh, nice.
So check out this slide I prepared earlier.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so I thought I'd showcase just a few different upgrades from the set as well that are more Mandalorian themed as well. So yes, there is in fact the dark saber, and the dark saber is unique in that while it is green, you can play it on any Mandalorian unit and basically ignore the fact that it's green. So you can play it out of aspect. So you could be playing like red yellow aggro, but also play the dark saber. And the dark saber is a real big center point, right? Because when you attack with the unit, all of your other Mandalorians get experience, which is great because it turns on all of their upgrade matters abilities as well. Plus, it just makes your entire board bigger whenever you swing, which is pretty massive. And importantly, it doesn't give experience to the person with the dark saber, but it buffs everyone else.
Okay, wait. Lower question:
Yep.
is the dark saber supposed to be the evil lightsaber?
No,
No,
it
not quite.
yeah.
Oliver?
Oh, I was just gonna say it's like it was created by the Mandalorians. I believe was it, but it's just a symbol of their leadership. I think.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, because I was gonna be like, wait, lightsaber,
Actually,
dark saber,
hold on.
wait.
Let me see
Yeah,
who
yeah, yeah.
actually made the
Not,
dark
not quite,
saber.
but fair guess. I mean, Mandalorians historically, in a lot of the lore, have been like quite opposed to Jedi, so it would have made some level of sense. But no, it's just made of that. I feel like from what I remember from all those various series, the only non-Mandalorian who's ever wielded it was like Gideon, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Or and
Yeah,
Maul and Maul.
and more. Oh, more. Yeah, that's right. More wielded it too. But I feel like at the time, I suppose I should say the only non-Mandalorian who wielded it and had nothing to do with Mandalorians, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Because Maul was still kind of like leading Death Watch in a way,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So yeah, but yeah, so the Darksaber is pretty cool. I think it's going to be one of like the chase legendaries, both because it's iconic. I think the art is pretty good on it. Overall, Amelia Hutt is really killing it with pretty much all of the art she does. I think most of her art is some of the most popular in the set,
Yeah.
or in the game.
This one looks good.
Just,
Darksaber
yeah.
looks good, like as an art piece.
Yeah, just really crisp. What do you
Yeah.
think of the art piece Mandalorian armor? Yichin?
I actually like the Mandalorian as the hero, the hero art. I think that one
Yeah,
looks good. I'm
yeah.
not in love with Gar Saxon or Bo Katan.
Gar
He looks
Saxon. Everyone kept saying he looks like Flash Gordon.
he looks he looks chunky.
He looks really goofy.
Like his thighs are too thick. It's
Yeah.
he's got this like weird diaper thing going on that's like at an odd angle. It looks like
Yep.
some like Eddie Whitey's.
Yeah, he's a funny looking hero.
Yeah. I
Actually,
will say the thing that stands out to me the most is that Vambrace Flamethrower seems miserable and limited.
in that it's hard to beat.
It's hard to beat because it's like damage stays on, right? So
Yeah, damage is
um
permanent.
so it seems like it's very easy to just like snowball dominance wise. Obviously there's a lot of like upgrade removal and upgrade like anti like there's like you can just
Mhm,
like throw a big creature and it'll still be like it'll still trade with it, and that's totally fine.
mhm.
It feels a little tough to beat. But
It will
maybe
be
that's just
good.
my magic
It,
sense.
yeah, it is quite a strong card. I guess one of the main things is that there is an entire other arena, so you can
Yeah.
just go to space if need be. But I suspect it will be quite good. Like
Yeah.
units are generally kind of big enough, and because you can attack into the unit that has it as an upgrade, it's not the worst. But it's probably going to do some damage the turn it comes out.
Mhm. And then smuggle, the smuggle cost on jetpack. We haven't explained smuggle yet, but that's just the play it from your resource pile, right?
That's right. Yeah, the most common. We'll touch on it more later on, but basically, yeah, play it from your resources for generally +2 cost. That's kind of like the basic amount that you have to pay more.
Mhm. Gotcha. Okay, makes sense.
But yeah, so lots of upgrade matters stuff, which I think is pretty cool. I think Mandalorians are pretty common amongst a lot of fans. Sorry, pretty popular amongst a lot of fans, and the upgrades Voltron style decks are pretty fun among casual players. So I suspect Mandalorians will be pretty popular,
Mhm.
especially amongst more casual players.
Yeah. One thing that stands out to me is that these are all non-vehicle unit attachments, and one of
Mhm,
the criticisms I had with the first set's limited format was that space didn't really feel like it mattered too much. It felt like just like either you play like dinky 1/1s or like 1/3s,
mhm,
or you just use this as like an evasion thing. And a lot
mhm,
of the removal is targeted towards ground units. So it feels like
mhm.
it's very like it doesn't feel like a second battlefield, it feels like a uninteractive battlefield.
I get what you mean. I do agree for the most part that even in set one constructed, that is what space sometimes feels like. It
Yeah.
feels like the space is more like shadow, right, than it is flying in a way. It's almost like its own separate battlefield, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but it doesn't. There's not. I mean, most removal in set one, to be fair, targeted both battlefields. There wasn't a huge amount that hit only ground.
Mhm.
Um, but there's there's certainly more restrictions on buffing up space units. I think the reason for it is they're generally concerned that space units are more like space units because of their evasive ability
Mhm.
um are more powerful, right? So like
Yeah.
they kind of tax space units on stat wise. So like for a standard like 2 cost unit will be a 3/2 in the ground, but
Mhm.
it'll be like a 2/2 in space or something like that. They kind of dock one stat. So because of that, attachments going on space units would theoretically provide them with more value. So that's probably why. But also just I think for the most part, they've tried to stick with theme stuff. I could
Yeah.
probably see an argument for the flamethrower going on anything. Um, maybe not if it was Vambrace. If they just called it flamethrower, I think it would have been okay.
Mhm. Yeah, it makes sense, like, lore-wise and, like, flavor-wise, why it's not,
Yeah.
being attached to things. It just feels weird because it's maybe I'll change my tune when I see the rest of the set, but it feels like that, um, they particularly don't want space to be a very interactable battlefield.
Interestingly enough, I think that in set 2, I suspect we're going to start to see space only aggro decks,
Okay,
which are basically the types of what are they called in, I can't remember what they're called in Magic, the ones that you can't block them if you have greater power or that kind of stuff, just completely evasive.
Yes, or it's Skulk or just like
Skulk,
Dawn.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're almost Skulk-like, right? You're just trying to play flyers or evasive units generally. But
Yeah.
yeah, I suspect we'll see space become more of its own battlefield, constructed-wise at least. I think in limited it'll probably be similar at the moment, where it's mostly an evasive battlefield. But there are a lot of larger units in space in this set, compared
Yeah.
with in the first set, where most of the large space units were legendary.
It reminds me, I'm not sure if you played LOR, but it reminds me of the evasive aggro decks.
Yeah. No, I did play LOR, which was
Those
excellent
decks
game.
were relatively polarizing early on.
Yeah. No, definitely. Because elusive in LOR was the same as Shadow, wasn't it? Is elusive could only block elusive?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
flying essentially, but like there's no reach to kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah. But yeah. So Mandalorians in summary, basically.
Yep.
Shall I move on to the next one? Any other closing thoughts, Oliver?
Yeah, looks good.
Cool. Thanks. All right. So the next big thing in the set. So I'm kind of talking about two themes in one here, but they do interrelate. There are some separate things that they each do. But basically it's underworld slash bounty hunters. So underworld's a really big theme in the set, as you can probably guess from Shadows of the Galaxy. So I'd say like it feels like 60-70% of the units in the set are like either underworld or bounty hunter in some way. Underworld's Underworld doesn't have like a super strong theme that ties it all together like independently. Probably the closest I would say is Yellow Underworld specifically has a few bounce effects, like things that return units to your hand, and then hopefully you get value off replaying them, kind of like blink effects.
Yeah.
We'll see one of those on the next page, but that seems to be most of Underworld's thing. And Underworld's quite aggressive, so there is a card which I haven't put on here called Madame Proxima, who's like a 1-drop who just says whenever you play another Underworld unit, you deal a damage to your opponent's base. So pretty aggro focused. And we will again also see that on a few more cards on some other pages. But on this first page, I wanted to really talk about bounty generally. So bounty is this new mechanism where basically it appears on two types of cards. I'm going to skip ahead to another page for a second. So the first type of card it appears on is these, which are basically oversized units for low cost. But when they are defeated, your opponent gets some kind of benefit. So on like the Cartel Turncoat and the Guavian Antagonizer, and the Clone Deserter, your opponent draws a card. And if they capture Dr. Evazan, they get to ready 12 resources, which I think is pretty fun. It's a little fun flavor nod to being wanted in 12 systems. I'm always a big fan, mechanically speaking, of like units with downsides because I like playing around and trying to avoid the downside. Like one of my favorite creatures of all time from Magic was Abyssal Persecutor.
Yeah, that's a classic.
Which I think was just really, really cool. For those who don't know, it used to just be a big creature that said you can't win the game and your opponent can't lose the game as long as it was in play. So it'd create this kind of interesting thing sometimes where your opponent would be dead, but they can't lose. So you have to try and kill your own creature, but your opponent would be trying to do everything they could to make sure that your creature stayed alive. But yeah, so bounty units, as on a default level, they have that thing where they're oversized. They're oversized, but they have a downside, which, as I said, I like. And the other way you can do it, you can kind of see it on Jabba the Hutt as a leader. But some cards in the game, some units like Jabba and the Client, they actually put bounties temporarily on other opposing units. And there are also attachments which you can play, which give units bounties. Which that was the card type I was talking about that works well with the Mandalorian because they're upgrades. But it also works well with things like Reputable Hunter, which we can see there, which just if an opposing unit has a bounty, he's a really undercosted unit. He's basically a 2-drop 3/4, which is huge.
Yeah. And then you also have capture, right? Which is just a O-ring essentially.
Yeah, that's right. So basically, capture is a mechanic where you will choose an opposing unit. Like, for example, Jabba the Hutt does it when he deploys. where a friendly unit captures another unit. What that does is, I mean, I think that's actually completely straight out of Legends of Runeterra, as it turns out as well.
Yep.
But basically, the unit goes underneath the unit that captured it, and then it just stays there until your unit is defeated. So, for example, let's say that Darth Maul captured the Reputable Hunter, then the Reputable Hunter basically leaves play, but the moment that Maul is defeated, the Reputable Hunter will return to play. So capture cards tend to be quite undercosted, like they're very effective removal for their cost, but they have the downside in that, when your opponent does defeat your unit, they get them back. So you have to be careful and try and keep your units alive. It almost puts a bounty on your own units, right?
Yeah, and damage doesn't stick around if they're captured, right? So if I'd say
Yeah.
deal damage to something and then it gets captured, it comes back with full health.
That's my understanding. So that I don't think they've clarified it. I'd be very surprised if the stuff remained damaged when it was captured. So
Yeah,
I think it just basically leaves play and then comes back. And they don't get their when played triggered again or when deployed because they're not deployed and they're not played. They just come back into play. The last card I had kind of unique. I had a few other cards on this page, but Cad Bane, who's quite a favorite. I know Oliver said he quite liked him.
Yeah.
Cad's pretty aggressive, so I mean 6 for basically a 4/8, which is huge, like big defense, but he's not as good when he's getting attacked into. But he does a huge amount of damage when you play Underworld cards. His flip side, so his leader side, only does 1 damage, not 2. And it's still also only once per round. Bosk is also pretty interesting. So Bosk doubles all of your bounties, or it doubles a bounty once per turn, which is pretty awesome. And then his hero side is completely different. So his hero side is just tap, deal a damage to a unit with bounty, and then you may give it +1 attack this turn. So it's kind of interesting. You can shoot your own units that have bounty on them to, make them stronger and hit for harder, or he can just be used to kind of ping your opponent's units with bounty. But he loses his big payout. He is big. 5 for 4/6 is pretty solid. Bobo is considered oversized at 5 for 4/7, so 4/6 is like pretty on point for a 5-drop. And the last card on the page is just Dryden Voss, who Dryden's pretty cool. Like being able to take control of a captured unit is just a fun mechanism, and I think it's a great mechanism to include on a legendary.
Yeah, seems pretty fun.
Yeah, I don't know if he's excellent, but I could see potentially playing something like Jabba Yellow, and then using Jabba, capturing your opponent's biggest unit, and then immediately slamming Dryden afterwards and just recruiting it. I can see that being very strong.
Yeah.
Maul on a side note, I know I didn't talk about him too much. Maul is a monster. Ambush, Overwhelm, and 7 attack is huge. He's kind of like an instant win condition. One of the key things in the game is that sometimes like dealing the final points of damage to your opponent can be pretty tough because haste is very rare in the game. And a lot of the units that have haste or can basically come into play ready are quite rare, or there's very few of them.
Mhm.
So Maul being able to come into play, swing immediately, and then basically trample over is pretty insane. And his stats are huge. He's very, very big.
Yeah. Seems like they're kind of trying to add 1 Sith per set, right? Because Darth Vader was also the big green black beater.
Yeah. So he was green black in set 1, and there was also Palpatine in red in that set. But yeah, so Shadows actually has 2 Sith. Funnily enough.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll show you the other one later on.
That's good.
The last kind of cards I was going to show were just a few other kind of underworld tricks and bounty related stuff. So Mark Clownkey is one of the ones I was talking about. I think everyone's very excited about that. Being able to return an underworld unit to your hand to deal 3 damage to something for 1, it's super cheap. And there's so many cheap, effective units that you can bounce and get rewards for. Like there's, on a very simple level, there's a 2-cost 2/2 with shielded. So you can attack with it, burn its shield, then bounce it back, deal 3 damage to something, play it again and get its shield back, which is pretty cool. Bounty posting is your tutor for all of the different bounty upgrades. There's like 8 or 9 different bounty upgrades in this set. So I think bounty posting will probably see some level of play because there's a lot of bounties that seem a little bit more specific. So, being able to toolbox them is pretty good. And then, so you go.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to talk about bounty, but if you wanted,
No, you go.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that stands out to me the most right now is that bounties are all very like it's an AB mechanic without actually having the B on it,
Mhm.
where every time you have a bounty on something, you have to find something to remove it as well.
Yeah.
So it's inherently card disadvantage because you have to essentially the benefit you're getting from the bounty has to make up for potentially not being able to cash it in until later, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So that's what concerns me about the long term, the viability of this mechanic, where it
Mhm.
seems more cute than good. At least when, especially the ones that you showed, which are just like heal 4 or like heal 5, that feels like, oh well, this seems pretty bad in Magic. And like
It,
heal 5, it can save your ass sometimes, but it's like, don't really want to spend a card on heal 5.
So interestingly, like I think a lot of people, including myself, underestimated how valuable healing was. Like gain life is very valuable. So
Mhm.
I think a lot of people were actually quite concerned about the client generally,
Okay.
because he's on point as far as like stat wise goes. He's pretty on point. Like 7 worth of stats for 3 is great.
Mhm. Yeah.
He has his stats in the right direction for kind of what you want him to be doing.
Mhm.
In that you want him to kind of live. He's probably going to survive 3 attacks because he comes in shielded. Then they're going to need to whack him like twice more before he dies, which is really annoying. Um, and against aggro decks in particular, they're not going to waste any time at all trying to bother killing him because it just takes too long. But then every turn he's out, he's just going to heal you for 5, as long as you can remove something, right? Which
Yeah.
generally he will. So I think
Yeah.
I agree with you in that generally the bounty, so like top target right next to him, I don't think top target is as good because it's kind of its own card, but the client is repeatable bounty. Same with
Yeah.
Jabba, and I think
The,
they're much
the
better.
reveal ones definitely seem very, very powerful. I think
Yeah.
as a standalone mechanic, I'm not as sold on it because it seems like
Mhm.
it's we're adding a lot to the adding a lot to make sure it's playable.
Mhm.
And I think that if you have this mechanic like central to a set, I feel like it should try to be as neutral as possible without too much massaging.
Mhm.
Is a client a rare or is it a common? I can't
He's an
tell.
uncommon.
He's an uncommon. Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
seems very powerful. Shielded tokens actually seem very powerful in this set.
They are very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
And
client, to be honest, power level wise, the client feels very high. Like I don't actually, in general, in the set, this is not so much a mechanics thing, but more of a just rarity thing. I feel like this set, the rares and uncommons are like very high value, and the
Mhm.
legendaries are okay. Like,
Yeah.
which I actually like. I feel like that's how it should be. The legendaries are interesting, unique cards like Dryden Voss. They're not necessarily like the super high power level cards. That's not to say they're not good, but they're not like the auto 3 ofs, you know?
Mhm. And maybe
They're very
it's something
specific.
that I wasn't paying attention to earlier. But it definitely seems like there's a bit of a toughness creep. I don't know, like a defense creep,
Mhm.
where there's a lot more. I'm seeing a lot more units with high defense,
Yeah,
high
I feel like in
yeah, high life.
general, yeah, I'm not sure if it's a conscious design decision, but I do feel as though high toughness units in general are pretty desirable. I think most units, like as an example, in the first set there's a unit Echo Base Defender, which is a 3 cost 4/3 with Sentinel, which is
Mhm.
great stat line, great keyword. But I wonder how like whether he would be more insane as a 3/4, just because that toughness bump is really important. And yes, in this set, I do feel as though, generally speaking, toughness is bigger. But part of that also comes with the fact that a lot of the units in the set, I suppose, have upgrade matters, so they want to make sure they live.
Mhm.
Um, but also they have bounty, which means that their stats are a bit more oversized than usual.
Yeah, to to offset the downside of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, there's a couple other fun cards there too, like Spare the Target, which has some interesting interactions, like bounce an enemy unit and collect its bounties. So you get the bounty once, and then if they play it again, you get it a second time, which is nice. Um, it's much better against obviously units that already have bounty,
Mhm.
but even then, there's a couple of cards. There's a card called like Unrefusable Deal or something like that, where it's a bounty that you play on opposing unit, and then when you claim the bounty, you play that unit for free. So with Spare the Target, it's pretty insane because it basically just becomes a removal spell. Though you take control of the unit until the end of the turn, and then it dies, which is
Mhm.
very good. IG-11's fun. I just love the I cannot be captured. Just if he would be captured, he just blows up instead, which is fun. And Xanadu Blood has a lot of powerful implications. Exhausting resources or dealing with enemy resources does seem to be a bit of a yellow thing. And I think Xanadu Blood being able to potentially exhaust 1 to 2 resources on the turn it comes out. Like if you give it ambush, you can basically trigger it twice, which is potentially very, very good because you just off tempo someone.
Yeah.
Being able to deny like a turn 7 play, for example, I think is huge because 7 tends to be the turn where you slap down Luke, you slap down Vader, you slap down U Wing, and Xanadu Blood just says no, basically. Any thoughts on any of those, Oliver?
I always thought it was called McClunky, but now they put it into text. Now it's McClunky.
Is it Marklunky, is it?
In the subtitles, it was like clunky, as in like CLUNKEY or something. But now it's like
Right, right.
McClunky. Yeah, I don't know. It's just funny. I've never seen it in
Yeah.
text now, but now they put it in text.
What does it mean?
It's just something he yelled out whenever he tried shooting Han,
Oh, okay.
or was it after he got shot by Han? I don't remember.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, I just need to pause for 1 moment, but I'll come right back.
Sure. I will say that Dr. Evazan has terrible art.
He is super uggo.
I didn't even know that was his name. I don't even know what the spider's name is. Or the tarantula. I don't remember. Dr. Evazan.
Oh, he has a name?
Yeah. He's from A New Hope. Yeah, when they first walk into the bar, he's the guy's like, I'm one in 12 galaxies. Then Kenobi is the one that wait. Does
Oh,
Kenobi
okay. I see.
Yeah, Kenobi chops off the tarantula guy's arm or something.
Mhm. Who's the guava guy?
I have no idea. It's probably from a show I haven't watched. Because there's like Star Wars Resistance, I think.
Mhm.
And that's probably where it's from. Let me check. Guavian antagonizer. I wonder where it's from. Oh no, just kidding. No, Guavian Death Gang is apparently in The Force Awakens. It's what is it? When Han is when they meet Han, they have the Guavian Death Gang like boarding a ship and trying to capture him. Did not? Oh right. Okay, I remember where these guys are now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this one seems pretty straightforward. It's interesting that they have there's 1 mana 2/3s now. And I'm thinking back to set 1 where like he had all these like 1 mana 1/2s that felt like completely useless.
Yeah. This 1 mana 2/3 sounds insane.
Yeah. I guess if 3 is the normal attack stat, it's still not very good.
There's a couple like 2 mana with 3/1s as well.
Yeah. I'm not
So
sure which ones are played though. Seems
uh,
like either
yeah,
if there's any like 1 damage ping hero,
there
which I
is.
think there is. I think I remember there was one.
There was yeah, it's the Grand Inquisitor, I think.
Yeah.
I think that was like one of the decks that Kenny showed me.
Mhm.
Grand Inquisitor. Oh no, it does 2 damage.
Mhm.
Palpatine definitely does a one damage, right? Palpatine. Hmm.
What do you think of the art that's set, Oliver?
I mean, I don't really mind it as much as you do. Like most of it's fine.
Oh, I
There's
feel like most of
obviously
it's okay.
Yeah, there's obviously like some inspiration taken from the art style from like Rebels and Clone Wars and stuff, but
Mhm.
yeah, I honestly don't mind.
What do you think about it, Yichin?
The art,
Yeah.
it's hit or miss. I think there's some interesting pieces. I saw a couple of the good showcase ones, or the hyperspace.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought some of those I said were pretty good.
Yeah.
Um,
And some are not.
yeah, some are not. I
Yeah.
think overall, as long as they're not like OG Han level bad, it seems acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, I figure we'll get on to the next one.
Yep.
So Smuggle, which we touched on before. So Smuggle basically is the new ability that allows you to play cards from your resource row. So the general feel is that the cards cost 2 more. And then the key thing is that they replace themselves with the card from the top of your deck. So theoretically, if you had 60 cards in your deck with Smuggle, then you could continue to play cards from your resource row indefinitely because they're always going to replace themselves with something else. The downside, of course, is that you're paying excessive amounts for those units.
Mhm.
But there are a few different kind of little spins on how Smuggle works. So
Mhm.
with Bazine, we see the most basic version where she just costs 2 more and that's it.
Yep.
But Privateer Crew is a good example of another version of Smuggle where if you smuggle them in, they come in with more experience. Whereas Millennium Falcon is the opposite, where it's actually better if you don't smuggle it, in a way. But if you do smuggle it, it costs exactly the same, so it doesn't increase in cost.
Mhm.
So it's kind of the reverse. It is cool to see an uncommon Millennium Falcon because the set 1 is legendary, so I'm sure people will enjoy having a pretty iconic card at just uncommon.
Mhm.
And then you have some interesting other interactions. So First Light is one of my favorite cards from the set. So First Light, Grit, by the way, is basically while you're damaged, you get +1 attack for each damage on you. So First Light can potentially be huge. It gives
Yeah.
every other card, every other unit that's not a leader Grit. And when you smuggle it in, you deal 4 damage to a friendly unit. So potentially, yes, that can be terrible. You can just murder one of your own units.
Mhm.
But also, if you've got a unit in play that can take the 4 damage, you're also giving it +4 attack, which is a pretty big surprise. And then Cassian's pretty easy. Cassian, just when he's played with Smuggle, he comes in ready instead. So he kind of gets a bit of an upgrade if you smuggle him.
Mhm. Yeah. Seems overall pretty cool. I do like First Light as well. I think that's a very neat interaction. Um, since there's no, I keep on thinking, trying to evaluate these in terms of like magic ease,
Mhm.
like forgetting that there's no instant speed interaction, so it's all uninterruptible.
Mhm.
So I was gonna say something about dealing 4 damage to cost seems weird, but it's just basically the same thing. So as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So yeah, I think it's overall pretty cool. I do like First Light. That's a very cool design. I'm less high on the cards like Privateer Crew or Cassian, just because it is the first mutation of this mechanic that everybody thinks of, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And that's
Yeah.
not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. I'm just like, okay, this makes sense.
Yeah,
Makes
I get
sense.
what you're saying. It's not as creative as First Light, right? It's just kind
Yeah,
of like, oh, well, what if you smuggled and had bigger upside?
yeah,
Right. Yeah,
yeah.
I get
Or
you.
it's more that it's not that it has bigger upside. It's that you're able to convey a slightly more complex mechanic without necessarily needing to spell it out, right?
Mhm,
Because you could just be like, oh, if this is played with Smuggle, deal 4 damage to a friendly unit, it gets +4, whatever.
mhm.
Uh, but it's got a more interesting twist on it, so that I think is very cool.
Yeah. Um, I think in general, Smuggle's a bit of an interesting thing where like a lot of people went pretty ballistic over it at first because they were like, it's pretty insane. And I do think it's quite a strong mechanism overall.
Hmm.
Um, but it'll be interesting to see just how many cards in your deck you'll want to play with Smuggle because I think the number is more than 0. You
Yeah,
certainly want to play some number because it's just, they're excellent to draw early on. You just resource them at worst, and then they're better than any other card, right?
yeah,
That you've resourced. So as long as the card's playability itself is reasonably high, like you're gonna have to resource stuff anyway. You might as well resource a card that's even slightly overcosted that at least you can still play later on.
yeah.
Um,
I
it
consider
also
them
has
to be like
you
manlands,
go.
right? In Magic, sorry,
Yeah.
they're basically like manlands in Magic, where they're slightly suboptimal as resources, Or I guess in this case, they're not suboptimized resources
Yeah,
at all.
yeah.
But it's just more like it's just like another option that you have for like overcosted stuff.
Yeah.
It's never. It's that. It's just. It's you devaluate them like any other card, basically.
Yeah, yeah. They're kind of, I mean, they're close in a way to yeah, I think manlands are a good equivalent, actually. Overall. There are some interesting ones. Like I think that, for example, I think that Cassian's design is, to be honest, one of the weaker ones, not in power level, but because his power level is good either way.
Mhm.
Like as a 3 cost 3/5 with no other effects apart from being rebel, he's still pretty good. Like that's a great stat line. That's oversized for 3.
Yep.
In fact, there's a card in the set that is literally just 3 for 3/5 with no other text, and it's just got a few different like keywords. Not keywords, traits.
Mhm.
But he's 3 for 3/5 with additional upsides if you smuggle him in, and he's pretty good smuggled in. Like three attack that comes into play ready is very important. There are some other weird interactions you can have with the ready this unit thing, but that's more to do with ambush and that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
I'm a little higher on the smuggles that do something more interesting, where the card's like slightly suboptimal both ways,
Mhm.
but is still useful to have. Like it's still sometimes useful in a pinch.
Yeah.
And then
And I think these sorts of mechanics are always just like split card when you get down to it. I feel like split card mechanics are never ever poorly received. They're always
yeah,
like, oh, this is interesting.
yeah, I agree. Um, Leader wise in the set, you got Lando who basically smuggles in units for cheaper, so that's pretty interesting. Although he kills resources whenever you do that, so
Yeah.
it's he's interesting. I get the feeling there's a few interactions in the set which are pretty crazy with him, where like the smuggle is not that much more expensive. Like just as an example, it doesn't work in this particular case because he's not villainous. But like there are some cards that are similar to like First Light. I suppose Falcon is a similar one, right? So
Mhm.
kind of in a cool way, you can bring out the Falcon on the turn you bring out Lando, and then you've got basically a 4 cost 5/5 in space, which is very undercosted.
Yeah. How much?
Which is
How
cool.
good is a 4 cost 5/5 on the board on the ground?
On the ground, I'd still say that 4 cost 5/5 is still slightly oversized. It's
Mhm.
not as oversized. I think the general stat line for a 4 cost would be like 4/5, so
Mhm.
like 9 worth of stats. So it's probably 1 oversized.
I
But
see.
in space, it's like 2 oversized.
Makes sense. Yeah, it seems like it's a pretty standard thing to do with like privateer crew or just like other stuff where in draft you just draft a couple of things that get benefited if you smuggle them
hmm
and call it a day basically.
hmm yeah, definitely. And Hondo's okay. I'm actually like a little bit disappointed with Hondo, honestly. I know that he's like a really well beloved character. Um, I just think that his ability is really basic and like not that interesting. He
Does
kind
he
of
have
just makes.
does
Sorry,
he
say
have
again.
buck teeth?
His other leader ability?
No, sorry. Does he have buck teeth?
Oh, does he have buck teeth? Uh
Art makes it look like that. I'm not sure.
yeah, I don't think he does.
Okay.
Um,
Sorry, go on.
but yeah. My point is that he basically makes smuggled units like on curve, effectively.
Yep.
So like when you smuggle them in, they're okay. Like they're about the right size they should be, which is fine, but
Mhm.
just not that exciting.
Mhm.
I don't know. I kind of wish that he had a few more interesting abilities. At least like Lando's ability is very, very unique, right? Because it's like big upside, big downside. But I suppose that's just my own biases showing. I prefer that.
Mhm. Yeah, he seems very like low risk.
I think the risk with him is that you almost have to play like hyper aggro stuff with him.
Mhm.
Like I think he'll be pretty good like red yellow with stuff like Cassian, right? Like being able to bring out Lando turn 4, then bring out the Falcon immediately after. Then next turn you can bring out Cassian for 3 and still basically ready him, which is good. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
There is another leader in the set which I'm not talking about today, but Han, who I think is probably going to be the premier aggro leader from going forward. He's just insanely good.
Mhm.
On a side note, I do like the little backwards compatibility, like that Han from set 1 works really well with Smuggle. That's kind of fun thematic. And that's the kind of interest I kind of wish Hondo had.
Yeah, he seems pretty tied to the mechanic. I mean, so does Lando, I guess. But uh,
Yeah,
do you know if they intend for this for smuggle to be a evergreen mechanic?
I don't know if they've made it clear whether it's going to be evergreen or not.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if it is. But yeah, they haven't made that clear.
Yeah. Capture and Smuggle seem like the most likely candidates for evergreen mechanics.
Yeah, I could see Bounty making it occasionally, like a very not evergreen in the sense that it appears very commonly, but evergreen in the sense that sometimes you might have a unit that pops up and it has Bounty on it.
Mhm. That's a deciduous. That's what Mario calls it.
Ah, very good. Very technical. Alrighty. Any other thoughts, Oliver?
You mentioned like there's another Millennium Falcon version. Is it ever confusing to have like different cards of the same name on the field? Like
Not
whenever like
really.
trying to talk
So
about it.
the main thing is not really, and that's all. But no, it's just as long as they're different art, I think it's fine. The kind of thematic explanation, or at least the hand wave that they do, is that it's just meant to represent that character's growing role. So it's not that there's literally two Han Solos flying around. It's just that Han is performing multiple tasks.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, look, I concede it's a bit of a hand wave, right? It's just an explanation to kind of make it so that they can continue to use iconic characters without making it so that your decks are super restrictive.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, you
Yeah,
see it with other games with any sort of IP where eventually you run out of characters to make cards for, so you just kind of repeat the greatest hits.
Mhm. Yeah,
okay.
it just happens. Like I don't have a huge problem with it, and like mechanically it works fine, right?
Right. Yeah. I know they have like the different subtext, whatever. So like Millennium Falcon Lando's Pride. So you can always refer to it
Yeah,
by that. But yeah, I don't
yeah.
know. Just
Because
curious.
I think I can't remember what the one from set one is. It's like old girl or something like that.
Yeah, it's when it's Force Awakens Millennium Falcon, right?
It's like it's not Force Awakens. It's like episode 456. It's
Okay.
like this is Falcon before it's really damaged, right?
Mhm.
Um, maybe the original one is like bucket of bolts or something.
It says piece of junk.
Yeah, but yeah, all right. Well, I'll move on to just a few of the final cards from the set. So I wanted to really showcase these, so just a few Force units, but really I want to talk about Kylo and Rey. So look, the sequel trilogy is really controversial, but I really like that they've been seeding sequel cards in the first two sets. I think probably Kylo and Rey are two of the cards I'm most excited for. Um, so Kylo is the second Sith that I was talking about, by the way,
Mhm.
or at least Dark Jedi kind of thing. He certainly is trying to be a Sith. Um, but I just think it's really cool, like the little text that lets you play them with each other. So you can play Kylo in like a blue-red Rey deck, and you can play Rey in a blue-red Kylo deck, and their abilities actually work better in those decks than they do on their own. So you're better off playing Rey with Kylo than you are just Rey, and you're better off playing Kylo with Rey than you are just Kylo. Which I think is really cool. But they reward you for kind of more unique deck building, and you can still gain benefit off their abilities, but you just have to think about what you include in your deck. You're more likely to include like non-heroic stuff with Rey and non-villainous stuff with Kylo.
Mhm.
So
I like both of their arts. I think their unit arts, or their leader unit arts, or Kylo's unit art, Rey's leader unit art. I think those are excellent. I can
Mhm.
see the demand from the Japanese Kylo Adam Driver fan base right now for this card.
Yeah. Is there a big Japanese fan base for Adam Driver?
Oh, Japanese middle schoolers went gaga over Kylo Ren. I don't know why, but he's one of the most popular characters in Japan for Star
He's
Wars
so
because of
dreamy.
that. He's dark, he's broody, he's got a mysterious past. I don't know. Something about him.
Look, look, he is basically a shonen anime protagonist, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's the same, like I think, sorry, this is all my opinion,
Mhm,
before you cancel me. I think this is the same reason why Snape was popular among like middle school girls.
mhm. Because he's so edgy.
He's so edgy, but he's got a heart of gold, doing it
Mhm.
for his one-itis, right?
Yeah, yeah. Look, I get you. I get you. But yeah, so I think Kyle, they're unit wise, they're pretty cool. I do actually like Ray's art as well. I think the only comment I made about it, like Ray unit, so the legendary, the 4/7,
Mhm.
um, the only comment I made is I kind of wish because they mirror each other, like they're supposed to kind of be used in the same decks, etc., or at least they're very related. I kind of wish that the art style was just consistent between the two.
Yeah,
would have taken.
it feels
I
like
would have taken
that.
either one.
Mhm. If you swap the ray arts, right, it would just mirror each other better.
Yeah, yeah, it'd be totally fine. But look, I don't dislike them. I like both arts individually, but as I said, just because they go together, I wish they kind of went together a little better.
Mhm.
Kylo Leader, by the way, does have a really interesting ability on his non-unit side. So his unit side is 5/4 for 4, which is oversized, but he gets smaller based on cards in hand. Um, and his leader side is exhaust, discard a card from hand, give a unit +2 attack for this turn, which, to be honest, is probably overall a pretty weak leader ability. But the main thing is that he's an enabler for reanimator strategies, and there is a card in the set called Palpatine's Return, which works well with Palpatine. Go figure.
Oh yeah, it makes sense. That's pretty cool.
And yeah, I just thought I'd introduce Grogu too. So Grogu's cute. Everyone loves Grogu. There's a lot of controversy on the fact that he has 4 fingers though. So someone
You're
got
not
the art.
supposed to?
He's not supposed to. I think he has
Yeah,
3.
he's supposed to have 3 fingers. The Yoda species only
Yeah.
has 3 fingers.
Mm,
So very controversial.
big mistake.
The his ability is very good, right? Just being able to lock down any enemy unit turn after turn is very valuable. Like very good against aggro. He's 0/5. He's just like impossible to kill, and he's got the force trait. Force trait is pretty valuable. So having it in yellow is very good.
Mm.
That's
What
all.
is it? What's the enablers for force, or what makes it good?
Basically, there's a few different cards that have much bigger upsides if you control a force unit. So, like an example, probably the best example is Force Throw. So, Force Throw is a 1-cost red card from set 1, where it's just choose a player, they discard a card. But if you control a force unit, you then deal damage equal to that card's cost to any unit in play.
Oh, that's pretty good.
So it goes from just like a 1-to-1 discard, which is pretty negligible, to pretty almost always a 2-for-1, and sometimes it's a 2-for-1 and you wipe out a massive unit.
That seems broken.
It's very good. Chirrut red decks in set 1 have been using that very well. So now you'll see Grogu force throw things and destroy stuff. There's
Nice.
other force enable like force cards too, generally in blue. But yeah, so it's interesting to see more force units.
Mhm.
Any thoughts, Oliver? I think the next one is the last page.
Nothing. You can continue.
Go. Alrighty, so this is just kind of a best hits from the set. So just a few different cards I like for various different reasons. There are quite a few powerful cards here, but also just cards I think are cool. So Triple Dark Raid is kind of my earmark for one of the most insane cards in the set. I have no idea. I think it's just going to be ridiculous, to be honest. So I've already mentioned that things that put units into play ready are insanely good. Like they're not. That's rare in the game. So putting something to play with haste is great. The fact is that you search top 7 for any vehicle and play it. That's quite a range of cards. U-Wing searches for 10, but U-Wing costs 7, whereas this only costs 3. It also reduces the cost of the unit by 5, and it comes into play ready, and the unit comes back. So there are pretty crazy things you can do with this. One of the big end games for a lot of decks at the moment is slamming Avenger, which is a 9-cost 8/8 vehicle that when it comes to play and when it attacks, your opponent has to kill one of their units. So now you can triple Dark Raid while you're on 7 resources, hit Avenger, play it for 7, or play it effectively for a total of 7, kill something when it comes into play, then swing with it in the same turn, hit your opponent's base for 8, kill something again, and then the Avenger comes back. Like, it's extremely powerful.
Seems pretty good. I'm gonna go off topic slightly and say
Yeah.
that I like how all the ones you chose seem like very build around cards.
Yeah. I tried to showcase a few different cards from the set that showcase, unique things rather than just going, here's a powerful card, right? Like there's certainly cards, all of these cards I think are good, but I haven't just gone, this is the best card in the set. I do think Triple Dark Raid is probably close to the best card in the set, if not a new adventure. But then the others are a little different.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're definitely cards that you have to consider what else you're playing. It's not just here is a card that is generically good. You have to really think about it. Although I suppose Tech and Mercenary Gunship are a bit like that. But anyway, we'll get to that. So a new adventure. This is probably one of my favorite cards from the set. Double yellow for N2. So return any non-leader unit that costs 6 or less to its owner's hand, then its owner may play it for free. So it does so many things. The first thing is that obviously you can heal a unit, right? You can just choose one of your own units and basically heal it. The next thing is it re-triggers all of your when played effects on the unit, which again is pretty great. You can also use it in a pinch to effectively exhaust an opposing unit because it returns to hand and then gets played again. When they get played, they come into play exhausted. So that's pretty crazy. And then on top of that, yellow has quite a few cards like Millennium Falcon and Fet's Fire Spray that come into play ready. So you can swing with them, then a new adventure them, play them again for free, and then they come into play ready again. So you can swing with them. Like it's an extremely flexible card.
Yeah. My first thought of it was, oh, you can get rid of upgrades for this, but that seems the other use cases seem much more much more universally good.
But you're right as well. You can. It's basically a way to delete all upgrades on something as well, right? Like yeah. It's extremely flexible. I expect like this is going to be a staple for a lot of double yellow decks for ages, and the way that they get built will be shaped by the fact that this card exists. You can even there's a combo with it with Bounty Hunter Crew from set one, where Bounty Hunter Crew is a 6-cost 4/4 with ambush. That when it comes into play, you return a event from your discard pile to your hand, so you can new adventure it, ambush something, and then bring new adventure back, and just rinse repeat that, which is extremely good.
Yeah.
Next up, you got Final Showdown. Final Showdown is probably one of the most fun cards from the set. It's one I think is pretty dangerous, but I do just like it generally. It's kind of like, in a way, it's almost like a time walk, right? You just ready every unit you control, but you have to win that turn. So, what's that called? There's a red card in Magic that does something like that. It's like take an extra turn and you lose the game next turn.
Final Fortune is the one. 2 red.
That's the one. It's kind of like Final Fortune, right? Which I think is
that's what I got. I assume that's the name. That's why the name is there too.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Then you got Endless Legions, which is the biggest Timmy card of all time.
Yeah, for sure. My Timmy sensors went off as soon as I read that. I was like, "Oh, this is kind of cool." And I saw the cast, like, "Oh, when are you gonna cast this?"
Yeah. So you basically have to play all the ramp cards ever, ramp into it, and then hope to win. Hope they don't just destroy everything. Because the thing is that the resources don't replace themselves.
Yeah.
So if you bring out 14 units, you better win. And look, like theoretically, you should win, right? If you bring out that many units for free, hopefully you just kill your opponent next turn. But if they have like a board sweeper or something, well, thanks for playing.
Yep, super laser, whatever.
Yeah, exactly, super laser. Or there's a new one in the new set, which is evacuation, which bounces everything.
That's funny.
Which is similar. Wrecker is pretty big. So again, 6 costs 7/6 is massively oversized. He has overwhelm as well. The big thing is he doesn't have ambush, but there is the base in set 1 that gives a 6 cost or less unit ambush for the turn. So you can bring him in, use his when played to defeat a resource to deal 5 damage to something, and then trample over it. So the big thing with that is that if you're attacking something that has, say, 6 or 7 health, you can basically reduce it to 2, then to 1 or 2, then trample over it. So it's a way to do like 6 damage out of nowhere. So I suspect he will be a go-to finisher for a lot of decks. Because he's just massive. Like he comes in, he kills something that you don't need, he kills something your opponent probably needed, and then he's just a 7/6 idiot.
Maybe it's just you showing the highlights, but it feels like there's a lot more units that are inherently 2-for-1s.
It could be the case. Certainly, as I think 6 and 7 drop units are more 2-for-1-ish.
That's
generally
true.
Like that's been set up. It's been set up that way. Like set 1 had that a lot too. Well, speaking of 2-for-1s, Poe can -3 yourself.
Yeah, it's pretty. I will say that the art caught my eye. After looking at it, I'm not sure if it's good or not. I think it's good, but it definitely caught my eye. I think Poe and Triple Dark Raid are definitely the arts that caught my eye in this batch.
Yeah, look, I really like Poe. I mean, I like him as a character. I like Oscar Isaac as a human person. He's an attractive man. But yeah, look, as a card in the game, I'll just gather myself. But 6/6 for 5 is huge. His effect may seem quite costly. Like it's quite powerful, I think, generally. Like turning any card in your hand into, upgrade defeat or a 1-for-1 from your opponent's hand, or a shock is useful. Like,
Mhm.
given that it's optional, right? You don't have to do anything, and then he's just a 5-drop 6/6. But he does combo well with his ship from set 1, which is 6 cost, discard your hand. You may discard your hand if you do draw 3 cards.
Oh, that's pretty good.
So, nice little thematic tie in there. And just to run through the last two quickly. So, Mercenary Gunship is a fun ability, bidding to take control of him all the time. But I also think it's going to be it is a real staple. Being completely neutral and 3/2, like it's on point stat wise for its cost. And then it's, very, very, very powerful.
Yeah, and as your opposing player, you never really want to activate the ability anyway.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
it's very tempo negative unless it's like, oh, this actually just wins me the game here.
Yeah. It is generally pretty rough. Like, sometimes I'm sure it will come up that ability is quite negative from time to time. But I think for the most part, it's swinging for 3 early enough that your opponent's not going to want to kill it for 4 or like take control of it for 4.
Yep.
Especially if you can just take it right back,
Yeah.
right? Because then it's just, as you said, tempo negative.
Yeah, and they don't exhaust themselves if they change control, right? So
No, they don't. So
okay.
if they take it and then you take it back, it's still ready.
Mhm.
And the last card is Tech, who I think Tech is probably. I think Tech is the best heroic card from the set. I think Tech is probably going to be really controversial over the longer term. I think he's completely insane because he gives everything you control smuggle. So
Yeah, it's very good.
yeah, it turns out. Imagine playing a control deck and running out of gas and drawing Tech. All of a sudden, you've got a hand of 9 cards.
Mhm.
Like, and they replace themselves every time. Like, yes, you're paying more for them each time, but he himself also smuggles in. So like you don't even have to hold him in hand or anything. You can draw him early game, play 3 of him, just put 1 down in your resource row. And then if it ever comes to the late game, well, you've got Tech, and then you've got 8 cards. So I think that he's just going to be such inevitability for the late game for heroic decks, which, in fairness, heroic control decks kind of needed that. They were lacking in real finishers. So Tech's not a finisher, but he is a way to basically just create so much advantage that your opponent can't overtake him.
Yeah, it seems like a cool card. Seems like a good way, like a good way to make control decks run dinky creatures.
Yeah, definitely. I think he is insanely good overall. I'm excited to play with him. The main worry I have with him is just especially in those late games matchups, right? He's just so indomitable.
Mhm. Yeah, I think Poe, at least from my short time playing, I felt like action compression was a super big thing.
Mhm.
Where you do like 3 different things in one action, and you kind of like get a lot of advantage through there.
Yes.
So it feels like that. Like if I had to choose like a strong card, I'd probably pick Poe.
Mhm.
But definitely like the other cards, without seeing any sort of context, they all seem very strong. These all seem very very strong in general.
Yeah, they're all interesting to strong cards, right?
Mhm.
I don't think every card I've picked is like the best card in the set. Probably, as I said, Tech and Triple Dark Raid are probably close.
Mhm.
But they also showcase pretty interesting effects. Like, I'm excited to play Triple Dark Raid, and I'm excited to play Tech. I feel like it's good that they're not just like 2-drop 5/5s where they're probably the best card in the set just because they're big
Mhm.
or anything, right? They do
Yeah.
interesting things. They're just very powerful.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think I do agree that action compression is surprisingly relevant. So you are right in that Poe being able to say potentially hit your opponent for 6 and then take out a unit in the same way, or hit an opponent for 6 and make them discard a card in the same action is very important. So look, I'm not sad about Poe being good. Not gonna lie.
Mhm.
I'm sad about him being legendary, but Anyway, that's kind of the set in a nutshell. Any final thoughts from either of you?
I'll let Oliver go first.
For like the Clone Force 99 stuff, do they all have different abilities like this? It doesn't seem like they synergize well with each other. It just seems
Yeah,
good
it's a bit
standalone.
unfortunate. So there's even a leader hunter, um, and he's probably like the biggest question mark leader in the set, where he kind of doesn't do anything. Like, I had to have a think about him for quite a while. See, I can bring him up and show him. Hang on, where is? So there he is. So he's pretty big, like 5'8" with overwhelm, but his ability is just on attack. You can reveal a resource you control. If it's the same name as a friendly unit you control, the resource comes back to your hand, and then you get a resource from the top of your deck. So it's like kind of card advantage. Like you do effectively draw an extra card as long as you can keep drawing cards that have the same name as other units you control.
Mhm.
But he's just weird. Like I'm really hoping that the clone Force 99 or the clone theme generally is having the same named cards. One of my little suspicions originally was that there was actually going to be 2 hunters, 2 wreckers, 2 everything else in the set. 2 of all Clone Force 99, but unfortunately there was not. There was just the one. And there is Omega as well in the set, who is where is she? There she is. Who she's kind of like Hera from set 1, where Hera ignores the aspect penalty of what you call it of Spectre units, and Omega ignores it on clone units. So you can play all of the Clone Force together, and she finds you a clone, which is pretty nice. And I think it'll be much better in the next set, one because the next set is Twilight of the Republic, which is people suspect is probably going to be Clone Wars.
That's cool.
But yeah, unfortunately, they don't super synergize at the moment. They kind of did that with Spectres as well, where they kind of synergize, but not really. And they did explain that the design decision was to make it so that they could be played independently, and they didn't necessarily have to be tied to one another. I do wish that they were tied to one another a little more, though, just a little bit.
Yeah, I want them to synergize with each other, but I mean, it's just it might be a little bit too shoehorny just to make them synergize with each other because then you just play it all together. And then
I
there's
think
like no deck
the
building
way, the way
element.
I would put it is this: I think generally speaking, the designers have done a really good job on cards in the sets because they have really subtle synergies, right? So here's an example. I talked about Millennium Falcon before, right?
Yeah.
So Millennium Falcon works really, really well with Lando because you can basically play it for 4, right? It comes out on the same turn that Lando does. You can bring it out. They go together. It is Lando's card, right? It doesn't explicitly say that though. So I think that's really clever. It's the same with Zori. So Zori Bliss. Do you know who Zori Bliss is, by the way?
No.
Yeah, she's in the episode 9, one of
She's in
Poe's.
episode 9, which is
Yeah,
why I completely forgot she existed.
yeah, she's Poe's
Um,
old friend.
She is Poe's old girlfriend. That is
Yeah.
correct. And you know what? She actually works well with Poe because she draws you a card when she attacks, and then you only discard the card in the regroup phase. So if you were to say discard that card to Poe, you won't have to discard a card later on. So I like those little nods, like when there's something included that makes them all work well together, even if it's just subtle. Right? It doesn't have to be the best combo of all time, but just interesting designs. Um, the only Clone Force 99 things that have worked well together, or at least synergize, are Echo and Hunter. So I didn't show Echo, but I can show him now.
That's
So Echo's
funny.
there. So Echo's decent. 4 cost 4/4, restore 2 is not bad. When played, you can neg 1 yourself, and then if you do, you give 2 experience to a unit in play with the same name. So it works with Hunter because Hunter fetches the same named cards from your resource row. And playing Echo as a 6/6 on turn 4 is pretty good if you can, double Echo or something like that. And the Marauder, which is their ship, in fairness, does also play reasonably well with it. But again, there's just not enough of the same named units at the moment. So I'm really hoping in Twilight of the Republic we get another Wrecker, another Echo, and so on and so forth. Because I think the Bad Batch are pretty cool. And it would be a very unique and kind of almost on point theme. Clones that work well by having more copies of themselves.
Right. So when you say same name, it doesn't care about the subtext. It just cares about the card name itself.
Correct. Yeah, it cares about the card name. So having, if you played a deck of like 30 different Echoes, that it would work.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not the exact copy because technically, yeah, the subtitle is not part of the card's name.
I see. And that's also a weird angle of the Marauder. I was like, that does not look like the Marauder, and I just realized it's below.
It took me a while to
angle
work
from
out because I haven't watched enough Bad Batch, I couldn't remember what the Marauder looked like. So I actually thought it was flying to the left.
Oh, yeah.
When I thought it was flying to the left, and like the missiles that it's shooting out were kind of like the exhaust.
Uh-huh.
And then I had a proper look at it, and I was like, oh, never mind.
Yeah, no, it's flying to the right. It's just a below angle. I was just like, that's a interesting angle to choose.
Yeah. It is, by the way, both the Adelphi Patrol Wing and the Marauder, I think, are quite good cards. They're quite big space units, interestingly, for their cost.
Right.
But anyway, I think that's pretty much it for the set. Obviously, there's 250 cards, and I didn't go over all of them. I didn't touch on the Wookiee theme. I didn't touch on Finalizer and the Rancor and stuff. But I think I've introduced enough of the general themes of the set and ideas. I'm really positive on the set. I think it looks really cool. I think there's a lot of really interesting leaders. Like I think Kira and Dr. Afra are really cool. I really struggled to not put them into my interesting cards list, but I was keeping
Oh.
Oliver and Yichin waiting too much.
There's Fennec Shan too. Man,
There
you
is
got,
Fennec Shand.
you got everybody.
Yeah, Fennec's great too. Lots of fun interactions with her. She's really small for a leader, like very, very tiny. So I wonder if that's going to be too much of a downside for her, because the general stat line for a 5-drop would be, as you can see on Han, like 9. And even 9, I would say, feels small. Because if you look at, say, Bosk is 10. And whatchamacallit, Bosk is 10. Moff's 9, but he gives buffs to other units. Finn's 10. You know. So it'll be interesting. But anyway, thanks for sticking around and listening to all of this, and thanks for being around for this as well, Yichin and Oliver. I know that Star Wars content is not the main thing.
It's okay. We have Oliver always says that we're free to do whatever card games we want. So
We have done Star Wars. Next time, stay tuned for Digimon.
Oh,
not
what a
Lorcana?
Pokemon.
No. But look, maybe someday Lorcana. But I played Digimon when I was in Australia, and I was actually pretty chuffed by it. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, I've been going through a bunch of older games with Travis Oliver. So,
Yeah, where's the videos?
a good question.
Huh.
Too lazy.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, shall we wrap it up there?
Yep.